Yes, Trisha, we are on live. You can start the session. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Harsh. Good evening, everyone. Another Saturday and the team at SASTRA, which stands for Security and Scientific Technical Research Association, brings to you the fifth masterclass of the Startup Masterclass series. Our aim is to address challenges, issues, and solutions for the startups. This week, we bring to you the speaker who can best address innovators' questions regarding how to integrate product design, strategy, technology, and business. We are elated to invite Ms. Devina Kothari today. Ms. Kothari is the director of Zuan Design Labs. She has paved her path as an innovator, social entrepreneur, and a TEDx speaker. She is a Red Dot Award winner and a proud alumna of IIT Bombay. For designing a pain-free closed-loop insulin delivery system, she has been mentioned for Jaya as one of the top 9 solutions across the globe for empowering caregivers in Immunization Innovation Challenge, organized by OpenIDEO and Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Her contributions have also been in creating a modular hydroponic system for soil-free agriculture and building a digital platform for ASHA and Anganwadi workers to accurately generate national health database. She's been making technology simple, tangible, and user-friendly. She was one of the 7 most powerful designers at the 4th Power of Asian Design in Taiwan. She has been invited by Google to mentor startups at Google Launchpad Accelerators, Google Dev Fests, and Google Solve for India initiatives. She's been consulting top brands in India on consumer experience. Welcome, ma'am. I open the floor to you to help us understand how the concept of design thinking is so useful in the innovation ecosystem. The floor is all yours.
Thank you so much, Trisha and Team Sastra. It's a pleasure to interact with you and the students and viewers across the world right. It's a fantastic initiative. I must congratulate all of you who are looking into this and trying your best to empower students and bring design to almost everyone today, because it's something that people really do not have access to, because it's very new and we do not have legacy of using design as opposed to other countries. So more power to you guys. Thank you so much for having me here. So we can start presenting. Can we go full screen? Okay, so while we fix some technical glitches, let me just introduce you what's design. I'm sure all of you know about it, and that's why you're on this link right now. But if I could just simplify it, it's when science and art meet together. So when I say art is not just drawing, painting, and all of that. Art is the other side of the brain. So when we talk about design, both the sides of the brain amalgamate and they solve for problems. So a lot of times we feel that you know design is a field which is only for people who are good at art or who are good at drawing or who like craft or who are not inclined towards maths and science and stuff. But I think it's time we break that myth, because it's just the other way around. People who love to play with maths, people who love to play with science, who are tinkerers, who always experiment, are the ones who would excel in design. Yes, the aesthetics are do play some role, but aesthetics is also science. I mean, if it wasn't science, then how would most celebrities get certain, facial features fixed? And they would have softwares, right, to show them that, this is how you're going to look once you fix your nose or once you fix your eyes and stuff. That's also science. So that's exactly what design does. I mean, it amalgamates both the science of the brain, and that's one of the things that I really strive to break as a myth. Because very often when I go on certain platforms, a lot of parents who come and ask that, if my child is really good with art, does design serve as a very good career option? And that's where I say no. There's no relevance there. All right, I think our glitch is fixed and we can start sharing. Let's do full screen. All right, never mind. So what's design thinking? So design thinking is more of an iterative process, where we have to understand what's the user, what are the challenges, and we also have to challenge the assumptions that we have created about the user, about the problems. And when we do that, we redefine the problems, because unless until you challenge your assumptions, you cannot redefine, because we are married to the definition. And that's what we break during design thinking. Now, it's also an attempt to identify alternatives. Now, these alternatives could be alternative strategies, alternative solutions, alternative assumption about the user, and so on and so forth. But these alternatives are actually the ones which are not apparent upfront, like things that are not easily visible. Those are the ones that we derive from design thinking. Now, what are the ones that are apparent usually? So the ones that you see up front and which are very simple to understand and see are the ones that most people understand as the problem or understand as a probable solution. Let me give an example. Now, this is not design thinking, but it helps to understand how analysis and all work, which will help our forward conversation. Most of us have gone to doctors. Most of us have had a situation where we have cold, flu, and fever. Definitely not the right time to talk about this. But so whenever we go to the doctor, we say that, okay, I'm having a problem. Doctor's going to ask, what's your problem? We say, okay, I'm feeling cold. I have fever. I feel chills. I shiver. And then the doctor will say, okay, are these your problems? And you would say, yes, these are my problems. Then the doctor is going to put his analytical mind and is going to tell you that, okay, get a few diagnostic tests done. You go, you get those tests done, and you come back. The doctor will look at those diagnostic report and will probably say that, okay, you have malaria. That's your problem. Now, once you identify the problem, then you solve the problem. But initially, if you ask the user, did the user know that the problem was malaria? No. The problem, what the user perceives as, is usually the symptoms. These symptoms are one of the first signs of the problem. So what we are going to do next is to go from symptoms to the problem. Now, for a doctor, because there is a science associated and there are centuries of legacy, they have a systematic method in which they will eliminate, certain things and then come to a certain conclusion, or vice versa. But in problem solving, the field is so vast and so complex that we do not have a single methodology. We're still evolving. So design thinking is one of those methodologies that has been practiced since almost, I guess, 1960s or 70s. People have benefited, and there is a certain framework now. So it's best to build on it. So the next few slides are going to be concentrating on that. Next one. Great. So one of the best examples of design thinking's impact are the Pillpack and Airbnb. I'm sure all of you have heard about these at some point or the other. Airbnb is something that every startup conversation definitely touches upon along with Uber. So I'll touch upon that later, and I'll quickly jump to the Pillpack first. So Pillpack, I think, got recently acquired by Amazon in 2018. What it does is, in the US, they have different set of laws as ours. So this, you know, situation is possible there, but not in India. So what somebody realized is that whenever there are aged couple, they have certain set of pill requirements. Now, apart from that ailment giving them problems, there is the other set of paraphernalia which also gives them truckloads of problems, like standing in the queue at the pharmacy, forgetting their pills. Sometimes they are on the move and they've forgotten their pills at home and they do not remember which ones to take. And that's the situation where they sometimes miss their diabetes tablets, sometimes they take extra of their tablets, and that further leads to certain complications. Also, their family structure is different than ours. They do not always have a caretaker along with them. So a couple of these problems they identified and they figured out that how do we solve for it? So as soon as certain pills are prescribed to a couple or a particular patient, it directly goes to the pharmacy. The pharmacist is going to figure out what dose to take when, and it's going to convert them into sachets. So all you have to do is just take a sachet and pop your pills. You do not have to think about which blister pack to dispense medicines from. Have they just eaten it and they forgot after 2 minutes, and so on and so forth. So that kind of simplified caregiving from a pills perspective. Another is Airbnb. I'm going to talk a lot about Airbnb in the forthcoming side, so hold your horses there. So let's quickly shift to the next one. So these two I would highly recommend everyone who is watching this live right now to definitely go and research more about these two startups. That's completely based on design thinking and one of the best examples, I believe. Now, one of the other frequent questions that I get asked is why design thinking? Why not something else? Why not just simple thinking? Why design thinking? So the answer lies in, again, further few slides which are going to follow, but main core is right now that all of us are going digital. Since last 1.5 years, we all have seen the benefits of going digital and how it has changed our lives. So it's very crucial to develop and refine skills to understand and address rapid changes in the user's environment and behavior. I think last 1.5 years again, we all have seen that how changes happen and how our behaviors change. Like I see my mother going online and ordering food, ordering grocery from apps that she had never used before. And she figured out her way. She might not be as tech savvy as all of us initially, but now she's more tech savvy than me. She recommends me that this is what you should be buying based on how Amazon recommends her that since you bought this, you know, something else going to be relevant to you, which is fantastic. Second is design thinking helps us tackle ill-defined or unknown problems. And I'm again emphasizing unknown problems. Now, in a very casual terminology, we call it wicked problems. Why wicked? Because they do not surface immediately. They are deep lying inherent problems, which if you tap on, then you have a unicorn in the making. And of course, even when you know that you've identified a problem, but if it's not human centric, then it's not going to be good on the adoption level. So design thinking is not only going to help you to identify those hidden problems, but is also going to tell you that how do you address them, keeping the human or the user in the center, at the center rather. Right? So that's the moat of design thinking. Now, the next is that what are the key stages in design thinking and are there any tools? So one of the best tools that I feel is that we can use for design thinking and various stages are the IDEO 52 cards. Now, these are cards that have been used since ages. People have benefited from it, and it's very easy and simple to use. What I also do is that I convert those cards into more Indian centric approaches. Say, for example, there is one card that I use a lot, which is fly on the wall. Fly on the wall is a method in which you silently observe what things are happening and you start taking notes, but without interfering in the activity. Contrast to that is a role play, wherein you actually behave like, say for example, you're designing a shoe. Then you have a role play of a cobbler, because at some point your shoes are going to be fixed by a cobbler and so on and so forth. And then you role play and try and figure out that what are the challenges. If you design your shoes in a certain manner, is it possible to fix it? Is it possible to not fix it? And so on and so forth. Sorry. So fly on the wall in the Indian context is very different versus in the Western context. Now, in the Indian context also, if you are silent and segregated somewhere, somebody other is going to notice you and ask you questions. So you cannot actually be fly on the wall. You will be visible. So how do you make your way out through it and stuff? So, but I guess once we start using those cards, you will realize for yourself that how do you tweak it for the Indian context. But those by far, according to me, are the best tools. And I would highly recommend everyone to use it. Please pardon the glitch here. These are not black and white, but unfortunately they look black and white. This slide's a bit different. But basically, these are 5 steps. First is empathize. Next is define. Third is ideate. Fourth, prototype, and then test. These are 5 steps for design thinking. Now, if you see the arrows, it's not just linear. There are a couple of them which jump the queue, right? So it's a non-linear process. A lot of times you will be at stage 4, which is prototyping, and you will realize that, oops, these features probably are misinterpreted. I'll give you an example. So when we were doing JAM, now I come from IIT Bombay, so I had this dream of designing the best UX UI and something so fancy that the Asha and Anganwadi workers are going to love it and fall in love, use it left, right, and center. I got fantastic feedback. They loved it and wanted it. We went all the 9 yards, created it. Then slowly you realize that you're not using it, because in the back end, when you start tracking things, it's minimum. So then I went back to them and I asked them, why are you not using this? Then they said, it's too beautiful. If we touch it, it'll break. Now for us, it seems a bit strange that how can a digital app break? Or how can something which is digital get quote unquote damaged if they touch it? But that's the perception. I mean, at that time in 2014, 15. So we had to go back to our drawing boards and make it less fancy, less awesome, more so that they are used to using stuff in a particular system or in a particular way. So it needs to be less perfect. And then when we again went for testing and stuff, that's when the adoption rate was better. So things like these, you would go all the 9 yards, like from stage 4, we went back to stage 1, and then we had to start again. So that's the non-linear iterative method of design thinking. Had we launched it in the most awesome manner, the adoption would have been extremely low and would have been a colossal failure. But that's also fine. I mean, there is nothing which has succeeded in the market without multiple failures. But in case if we can mitigate risk initially, I think that's a great point. So that's the nonlinear process. The first one is empathize. Now, empathize is, okay, can you just go to the first one? Yeah, perfect. So empathize is research uses needs. Now, I'm going to again emphasize on needs because there are 2 aspects, needs and wants. People usually get confused between the 2. Very often we use the terms very casually. But in design thinking, and once you use the 52 cards of IDEO, you'd be able to differentiate between need and want. I might want sushi, but I just need some basic food. So that's the difference. At the same time, whenever we talk about launching a product, about 5 years back, everyone was emphasizing on an MVP, and I'm sure most of the MBAs would know about these terminologies, which is the minimum viable product. But ever since, the Indian market has matured quite a bit, and now people are heading towards an MDP, which is a minimum desirable product. Because we have so many products servicing the same audience, doing the same stuff. So there is no such first in the market anymore. There are so many already. So then how is your product more desirable than the other is where the awesomeness lies. Now, in that entire thing, you factor in the wants along with the needs. So when you have segregation, you know exactly how much to pick from the needs and how much from the wants to add to this bucket so that you have the minimum desirable product. Now, in this entire thing, when we talk about needs and wants, what is at the center, the human or the user? So to understand that human, you need to have empathy. So empathy is very crucial in the HCD process, which is the human-centric design process, because that allows you to set aside all of our preconceived notions and assumptions about the user and then gain real insights into the users and their needs. Now, how do we do it? Again, idea cards, it helps you. It's into 4 sections: look, learn, ask, and try, which is so simple. Every kid can do that. Even a kid from standard 1 will be able to understand this. Okay, we lost our screen share. Okay, we have some. Okay, this is perfect. This is good. Let's skip to 4. Yeah, oh, wonderful. Yeah, perfect. Now we have colors. Super. So we jump to the next screen. Great. The next is define. So first is when we do empathy, we collect all the information about the user and what are their needs and wants. And then we analyze these observations and synthesize them to define the core problems. Exactly. Now, going back to our further initial conversation of the doctor, where the patient might say that my problems are fever, cold, shivering, and so on and so forth. But those were not the real problems, right? The doctor analyzed it and then came to a certain conclusion that the problem is malaria and not the symptoms that were perceived as the problems. So this phase is the define phase, where we state very clearly that what are the user's needs and problems. And then further dovetail this into something called defining the problem statement. So once you have the problem statements, there are going to be multiple stakeholders or personas involved. Now, in this situation, the doctor and the patient situation that we just talked about, what are the different personas? One is the doctor. One is the patient. Now, if the patient is a child, then the patient's mother, patient's father, patient's caregiver, in case if there's a compounder next to the doctor, that. So there are a couple of personas of a particular stakeholder. And then if we start defining them, then we are not giving names to the particular user, but we are giving characteristics that usually the patient is of age group so and so, demography so and so, and so on and so forth. We kind of create like a framework that these kind of users usually have this ecosystem. Hence, we make certain assumptions about them, which is going to help us further. So that's the persona and stakeholder stage, which really helps us a lot in the human-centered design. We can go to the next one. The third in line is idea. Then we start ideating that what could be solutions. So usually the first 5 or 10 options or solutions that you get that you think are brilliant are probably thought about by hundreds of people and discarded. So very happily put those post-its aside and then think from the 11th onwards, because all your assumptions or all the things that you really wanted to do to solve this problem would have been discarded. That's when you start challenging the assumptions. So all the personas and stakeholders that we had created initially, these will really help us right now. And then we start looking for alternatives. I'll give an example. Now, I'm not going to take many names or any hints on the city, but it's a very interesting example. So there's a city, and that city had created a situation where any pregnant lady, which is in BPL category, which is below poverty line or just above, above poverty line will get ambulance facilities if she would want to go to a healthcare facility for delivering a child. Everything's free. Over and above that, she would be brought to her house in the same in a similar facility in a proper ambulance. She would also get food in the hospital. She would also get some basic care for the newborn baby and stuff, which is absolutely free. It's something that no one can say no to. It's so good for the mother. But yet there were many ladies who were not availing these facilities. So then the officers believed that, okay, why is this happening? Because it's too good to be. I mean, it's just impossible. That why would somebody not avail if it is for free and if it's actually saving their lives, their child's life? So then couple of and there are certain sectors that are not very open about these things to everyone. So they actually had to send people dressed as like one of them and probe into the situation. And over a few weeks, they realized that because when an ambulance comes, there is a siren. And there are certain sections of the society who do not want to announce that our the female of the house is going to deliver a baby because they believe ki nazar lag jayegi. And there are so many myths associated with it, so many beliefs that are very difficult to break. So then some people around there figured out that, okay, if siren is a problem, if we turn off the siren before it enters the lane, would you still be using the ambulance facility? Then the answer was yes. And all they had to do is just turn off the siren before it enters the lane, and that's it. It's solved for it. Now, if actually you see, some people might have completely dropped the idea thinking people don't want it. And that would have been such a colossal mess because people actually want it. But for initially, for a few years, people would have to, maneuver their ways around certain beliefs and certain aspects of the society for quick adoption. And once the adoption is high, then you can slowly remove all the negatives from it. But that's doable because people have started seeing the benefits of this system. And that's what design thinking brings about, that you go to the depth of the problem and solve that and not the symptoms that arise from it. Not using the ambulance was a derivative of the belief in nazar lag jayegi. So that is just one example on challenging the assumptions and creative ideas. Next. And the fourth one, after you have truckloads of ideas, how would you know which idea is good or bad, or probably relevant or not relevant, sorry. So that's the prototyping stage, where you start creating solutions. And it doesn't have to be a very finished, nice, good-looking product. No, it needs to be just a very simple, easy to make, quick prototypes. And something as simple as paper prototypes. I encourage a lot of people who are doing digital solutions to create paper prototypes and then just fold them just like a Japanese fan, go to the user and get some feedback. Because that's one of the most earliest stages where getting feedback is really going to help you refine your product. A lot of times when we are doing something that we are very passionate about, we get married to it. So as and when somebody is criticizing it, we take it to our heart and we feel that, oh no, they didn't understand it, hence they are saying it like this. My product is the best. So let me refine it further. Let me make it more beautiful. They will understand it. And that's the mistake that most of us make. Don't do that. Don't make it beautiful. Because when you make it beautiful, you're going to conceal some of the hidden unpleasant things for the user. Make it evident, let them criticize it so that you know why they are not liking it or why it's not serving the purpose, so that you can create something which will serve the purpose. And that's where these quick and dirty prototypes are of great help. And I would highly encourage everyone to do that. Next one is the test, which is validation part. Now, once you have a prototype, then you go to the user and ask whether, is it working, not working, you liking it, not liking it. And more often than not, we need to redefine one or more problems, because the first stage where you're doing testing you will realize that everything that you've designed or everything that you thought was great is actually not useful. And after that will be the main design journey that would begin. And the next prototype that you make will be much closer to the final prototype. But most of the people usually leave the journey when the first test fails because it's too hard to digest. But I would highly encourage people to not leave the journey at that point and actually begin the journey thereafter. So the next, so these are the 5 different stages which are in design thinking, which is from empathy to test. Now the next phase, which is point number 5, is how does an idea translate into a product? And here I'm going to take an example of Airbnb, which we just talked a couple of slides back, and I'm going to narrate their journey and show how an idea translated into product, keeping in mind design thinking as the main core and some steps that are a core for product strategy. So we quickly go to the next slide. Perfect. So this, if you see, this journey is of Airbnb. The first, just notice the green dot, that's the journey that we're going to be talking about. First is there were 2 guys. They didn't have enough money to pay for their own rent and stuff. So I mean, 2 friends, right? So they thought, okay, let's rent out one bed. They had an air bed, and they said we'll also give some breakfast or something. We can afford that, and they put a price to it. So next slide. Next. Okay. So they thought, but how do you reach out to so many people? So you'll have to make a website. Now they didn't know how to make a website. So they asked their third friend to create a website for them. And that's when, the next slide. That's when 2 men and 1 woman showed up and they also paid $80 each. So they figured out it's a fantastic model. You don't have to do anything. It's our own house, our own apartment. People will come, use our extra bed, and we'll earn money. Wonderful. So then they thought that, okay, let's try and prototype. So again, they didn't know how to make a website. So they figured out this awesome friend who's going to make the entire website. And they said, let's launch. So they launched at this particular event and they got 2 bookings. Now, when they got 2 bookings, they felt, okay, what next? How do we scale this? Because it looks awesome, but it's not generating money for them. Next slide. Yeah. So then what they did was they were talking to a couple of friends. They were asking for feedback. One of them said that, look, you're putting all your eggs in the same basket and you do not have any alternate way in which you're going to earn money. And how will you fund your project because you're bootstrapped? So then they figured out that, okay, I can do a side gig and I'll fund my project. So that's when he did a side gig and earned their first few $1,000s. And then they put it inside Airbnb. Then they started making some more money, but they were kind of stagnant. Next slide. They were stagnant. Now, when they were stagnant, they were just making about $200 for a week for a few months. So then they thought, why are they not growing? I mean, they're doing everything which is right. So they were hitting the dead end. And next slide, they realized that people on a virtual platform believe who you are, what you offer based on what they see. So which means they had to go door to door in New York to click amazing pictures of the properties that were listed. Next slide. So if you actually see from prototype, test, they are going back to define and ideate. So they are going around and around again and again to try and solve for these problems. Then they realized that after clicking one of the best pictures of the properties and stuff, they started making $400 a week and they started to grow. It's everyone's surprised that they were rejected by a couple of venture capitalists in New York when they went for fundraising, and finally they got funded, and one of the best examples of unicorns that we have today. So this has been their journey. If you see, it's loaded with ups and downs and stuff. So if we separate, next slide, if we separate this entire thing, next slide, then there are 7 key steps that we see. Next. Yeah. The first one is generating an idea. They had an idea, pure idea that something like this might work. But out of those 15 ideas that they had, they chose one. How did they choose one out of 15? They could have chosen another 14 also. Why that one? Now that's product screening. Then you create concepts. They created a concept, right? They had one bed, they had some breakfast, two guys and one girl showed up, and the concept was validated. Third, sorry, the fourth one, which is the business and financial testing. Initially, they got a couple of dollars, then they started scaling up, and they made it a viable model before actually launching the actual Airbnb that we know of today. That's stage 4. Stage 5 is product development, where you make a robust platform that when people come onto your platform to solve a problem, the problem does get solved without any bugs. Sixth, which is the market test. So when they went to the market, they saw that people are not really coming onto their platform. It's not scaling up beyond a certain dollars. That's when they went back and they did a couple of fixes, and then they started growing. And the 7th one is the commercially viable one, where they actually got their fundraising and stuff. So these are the 7 steps from an idea to a product, its launch and fundraising. So this is where our presentation ends, and we'll quickly jump to questions and answers now.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I mean, it covered an entire journey from how, we had gotten previous questions on how the design thinking plays a role, from product development to how it goes towards, the entire journey of business plan. So, one of the questions that we had received is that, what is the role of design thinking, specifically in the stage of research? Many of our startups are, highly involved into scientific research, and as you said, that science and art go together. So these scientific researchers are very much security sector oriented. And as you said, that design is not just about making everything beautiful. So, what would be your one advice to our startups who are incubated with us, where they feel that yes, how they want to incorporate this entire design thinking process, specifically at the research stage?
So I think you answered the question yourself that when we're doing research, research is looking for answers to unsolved problems. So design thinking helps you identify that problem. So as we looked at it initially, right, that why design thinking? Now design thinking is help you surface what is not apparent. So in research, when you apply design thinking, you will get to the root of the problem first and then look for solutions. So in your research, solutions are definitely a part of the entire gig, right? But if you could identify a unique problem initially, then your research is fantastic. And it's not just about research, right? It's also the application of research. Today, we might create the best of spacecrafts, but we don't know that what are we going to do with these spacecrafts after we go to the moon? How is it going to help us today, here, now, in next 5 years, in 10 years? Then that's a failed project. Even if you went and you achieved it, what big help did it do to mankind? So design thinking is help you look at forward 20 years, 50 years, and then work backwards and help this research be more meaningful to humans, users at the core, and of course, identify the right problem.
Uh, Thank you so much, ma'am. Because we are also on YouTube Live, we've got a couple of questions, and one of them is this, that um, it asks that, yes, um, do you have any examples that are, technology-based projects and studies that use co-design, participatory design, or design thinking?
Sure, truckloads of them. Airbnb is one of the best examples. Apart from that, even Uber and Amazon. Let me give an example of Amazon. All of us have studied it. We knew about Amazon before it was launched in India. What was one big change that Amazon adopted for India? And that's cash on delivery. In India, everybody looks at the product first. They have their own parameters, silent parameters, wherein they validate in their mind that, okay, this price is justified for this particular product, and hence I will pay that amount. If you actually see in cash on delivery, do we actually open the box and pay for it? No. The box is still sealed, right? But we still pay when we have the box in our hand. We still haven't seen the product. But the positioning that this is cash on delivery increases the sense of security in the user, which is not used to paying digital initially. Whereas more financially mature markets, which is the US and UK, for them using credit cards was very normal. Ours is more of a cash market. We always pay in cash. I mean, initially, not now. So that's where they made that change. They applied design thinking. They figured out that we will lose, this market if we do not have cash on delivery. Similarly, Uber, you pay after your ride is completed. Now that's an analogy that is there for current day, auto guys and taxi guys in Bombay, Delhi initially. You have a conversation that how much it's going to take if you reach from point A to point B. They'll give you a rough estimate, you agree upon it, you complete the ride, and there is a cash transaction. Similarly, Uber adopted that. I'm sure they have a similar model in other jurisdictions as well. But Amazon was one of the first ones to do cash on delivery on India. And I think that's one of the best examples. Do I answer the question?
Absolutely. The second question that we had on the YouTube side was somebody has asked that do you recommend any kind of books or resources or videos that can give them more insight about how to apply design thinking into the business plan? Do you have any ideas or suggestions?
So there is no one Bible so far, but there are a couple of books that one can read. But I feel that more than books, because books are an opinion, somebody's opinion of a situation that is from the past. And humans evolve day by day. I mean, look at all of us. I keep on giving COVID as a black swan event and how it has changed all of us. Was there any book written on how the transition would happen from cash to digital? Maybe not. But we actually saw it happen in front of us. So although there are a couple of books there, and I'm happy to share the list, but I still believe that talk to people, meet different people, sit with people who are, around those chai gallas on the road, hear their conversations, always keep your eyes and ears open, try and figure out the whys of everything, hows of everything, whens of everything. And that's going to help you, if not today, then in coming future. But couple of books that I highly recommend is Change by Design, Universal Principles of Design. There is another book by Edward Dubuno, which is Six Thinking Hats and Lateral Thinking. I think these on the top of my mind are there. Having said that, I'll share a list with you, and then maybe on YouTube chat, we can post it and people can benefit from it.
Absolutely. And also because we are running out of time, it's just 8 minutes. So I'll take one last question from our from the YouTube chat session, which is by Chase Lucy. I hope I've pronounced the name correctly. I apologize upfront. She says, ma'am, can you please tell me how do we know when to stop? Like we think the idea is great and started working on it. But when do we know that it's not working? She also continues asking, also, what is the minimum time that one has to keep on a startup? I mean, the number of years it actually takes to make the startup recognizable.
Lovely. This is a fantastic idea because when you are married to an idea, you don't know when to stop. And that's exactly when I say don't give a timeline to yourself, but always jump these stages. So while you think you're working on an idea, within a few days, and here few days is less than a week. So that's a unit that I'm taking. Jump to prototype. Again, within a few days, again, not a week, few days, jump to validating that. And that's where the cycle will continue. If you start getting into the weeks zone, the weeks will convert into months and months to years. And that's where I personally feel that that's not a sweet spot. Always the least denominator or the unit is where we should always restrict ourselves, which is days. And anything beyond 7 days, it's not great, even for your research. So I also agree that a lot of research is going to take months. But then if you start in a particular direction and you don't know if there is a validation near around the corner or not, you keep on going towards the dead end and it'll be too late till you would realize. And after that, taking a U-turn, it's going to be a little difficult, emotionally as well and professionally as well. So doing these cycles every week is great. Having said that, it's not same or one size fits all situation. So there is a book by John, I think it's John or Joe, I'm not quite sure about the author's name, but it's called The Design Sprint. And Google uses this very often. Again, I'll share a link with you and we'll post it on chat. Highly recommend it. It segregates the entire design process into a sprint, and you can use it. I've used it, it's fantastic. And it'll probably help you answer that question by practicing it rather than preaching, because as I said, every situation is going to be different. To put a particular number will be unjust. So,
I mean, it did answer the question. I just hope that Miss Lucy also had her answers. Ma'am, a question from my side. So, what will be your one suggestion or one, giveaway to young entrepreneurs who are always there to try, take the leap of faith, but are always confused, especially during this time where there is so much of abundance of information and so many designs involved at every stage, where we look at things and we are so attracted to it, but we don't know as to an entrepreneur when should we, take that leap of faith, thinking that this idea will at least turn into a success. So, what is your message for young entrepreneurs out there?
every idea is awesome. Even if it's a me too, even if it is something which has already been tried and tested, still go for it. If you're passionate about it, while doing or while executing, you will figure out one thing which the others did not have, and you will incorporate that. I mean, look at us. We have Big Basket, we have Grofers, we have so many Milk Basket and whatnot doing similar things. We have Zomato and we have Swiggy doing similar things, but they are still wonderful startups and they are unicorns. So I personally don't feel that there is anything which is something that you should wait for. You should probably only wait for an idea and that's it. Go chase it. I mean, I personally feel that if Israel, even though being such a small country with so much population, if they can do it, we are the world's one of the most populous countries. I mean, 1/6 of the world's population resides in India. This is the only place where from idea to execution, testing, validation can happen in a few weeks. If we can't do it, anyone cannot, no one can do it. And if somebody can do it, I think we can definitely. So I think everyone should definitely try.
I mean, this is such a great takeaway. I hope that this entire masterclass has been, such an insightful event. It definitely was for us and our entire team. And we just hope that, ma'am, you will be our friend of Sastra. And we will hope to, keep on coming back to you every now and then whenever our startups and our innovators come to us and are absolutely perplexed into the stages of how to go about integrating the entire product to a business development plan. But with this, I believe that we have come to an end, unfortunately, with this session. But thank you so much, ma'am, for giving us this wonderful presentation. I mean, before today, I did not have that much insight into design thinking, but it does to me. And to the attendees as well, I speak on their behalf for thanking you for being here and giving us this session.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure, and I'm very happy to help anyone who is interested into applying design thinking for their startups, and they can definitely reach out to you, and we can take the conversation forward from there.
Absolutely. To all the attendees, thank you for joining with us today. As ma'am suggested, if you have any questions or doubts, please send it to the Gmail ID that we share, or you can even DM on any of our social media platforms, and we'd be sure to connect it with you with Ms. Kothari ma'am here. And thank you so much, ma'am, once again from the entire team at Sastra.
Pleasures, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Thank you.